Okay, I just got the recording started for everybody, and so at this point in time, I'm going to pass it over to Sarah to call it to order, and then do our roll call and over to Kathy.
Yes. So we're just going to let Stephen Miller not here, right? I'm just kidding. So Josh Slotnick, Catherine Nygaard, here. Todd Mowbray, absent. Becca Dawson, here. Cameo Flood, here. Susan Mace, here. Jack Rink, absent. Amber Schaefer,
Here.
Adrian Friend, Travis Hoffman,
Here.
John Newman.
Here.
Marilyn Ryan. Absent. David Blade.
Here.
Looks like a forum. First item on the agenda is to approve the agenda. Do I have a motion? I'll move to approve the agenda. Second? Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The agenda is approved. And now the approval of the minutes. To approve. Second. Favor? Aye. Opposed, same sign. Agenda is approved, or the minutes are approved.
Flying through things at this rate.
We are, and is there anybody, any of the public?
Yeah, I don't see any members of the public online or here.
All right, old business. Which is the voter survey results.
Okay, so I'll jump in a little bit on this one, and I wish I had even more to provide out, but what, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get myself in the camera view too. What we really ran into is we received about 67 survey responses. Historically, we ran a survey, and this survey responded to voter requests that mirror our confidence matrix that we had done in the past. And this was done by printing onto our instructions and putting a poster out in our polling locations. It had a web link and a QR code. And we had talked a lot about surveys right beforehand. We were working hard to try and get some more information because it really helps guide the decisions we make. And here's what we found. You need to put the work into getting those responses out, to actively engaging that. Just putting it out there and saying, hey, we have the survey out there. These would be what we would refer to as a self-selecting survey. And by not really hammering it and not doing the work we've done in the past, we've seen 2,000 responses in the past with the same designated survey. 68. And so what we really saw was that we need to be advertising this heavier. I reached out to Dr. Varsky, who helped us set this up. We used the same tool that we've used in the past. So it's Qualtrics. It's done with that program that will allow you to produce very similar results. The issue is that there's such a small sample size that it doesn't mean much. So I said, here's the reality. We can follow up on this data later, have a Christmas, and I'll touch base with you. She's going to put together the same report she has in the past, discussing a video about what came through, some of those metrics, but really you can't extrapolate a lot of data from this. What does that mean? Well, I think we got something good. You got to put effort and time into getting this out. And so this is looking at, in the future, if we want to survey people who didn't vote, people who did vote, we have to put, we as the elections office and, hopefully the support of the EACs, and that we're going to gain those responses. This is out here, groups that work in parallel. This is out here and can get a lot harder. I really feel like this was us trying to say, hey, we want to get information, we want to gain good information, and not having that capacity to advertise it really well. So we did run our survey. It does have the same questions that we discussed earlier with that confidence matrix, where you would like to go to, but it's such a small reporting that the info's not great. So Dr. Varsky will give us an update and an outreach, but I said don't rush it because it doesn't really give us anything to work on in this particular area.
So I didn't do the survey this year. So are there questions that they can write answers to, or is it all just multiple choice?
It's,
I did look at it, but.
no, it's not a lot of opening it, so they're almost all multiple choice.
Did you look at the results at all enough to know that? Cause I was speculating that people that did bother to respond were the ones that had something to gripe about. Would that be true or no?
To be fair, I haven't even reviewed to that point, as I'm like, full disclosure, when she said that, I was like, oh, no rush, this is 2 weeks before I had gone on vacation, and it was, please, everybody, take a little vacation, and I honestly don't know. I think that these are hard. When we get a self-selecting survey, these are a different level of engagement than our standard voter. So it's hard to extrapolate that data. And what we mean by that is if you have to take that first initial step to select in, you're gonna be a voter who cares. In some circumstances where it's online, you're gonna be a voter who's tech savvy. You can plug in the QR code. You can use if there's a web address too, you can type in the web address. So your sample size is not reflective of the entirety of the community. And it's not big enough that you can use it to say, based off of this group, we can deem that our voters want X, Y, and Z. They do give us good information. It's just not necessarily something that I can say, based off of these 67 responses, in general, voters in this county want this. An example of this is we asked in our last self-selecting survey, what do you feel about the flap that covers your signature on your affirmation envelope? And resoundingly, people said, we love that. Now, if we were to have done that same survey and run it through a group that conducts surveys like MIT or Big Sky Polls or somebody like that, they would have captured enough of the sample size of the community to be able to say our community as a whole feels this way about this. What does it say? Well, this higher level engagement people responded in this way, and it matters to them. Can we extract that out to say across the board, everybody in Missoula thinks this is important? No. And ideally, one of the big things that I'm looking at with this committee is using technology and asking and using surveys to help gather with input from the public to what we can do to increase turnout. And so some of these times we really need to be asking for things that we can extrapolate out on, and sometimes we can ask for more info. They're not exclusive, it's just that you can't say, according to this survey, voters in Missoula want. You can say, we asked voters and this number of people said they want this, but it's a big difference, and especially to me. Sorry, as I looked away from the screen over there too, I gotta remember we've got people online. So, more updates to come. Less than 80 responses is what it let me know is, hey, you do need to put effort into this. I was like, I got a quick, easy way, we'll get some responses, we'll run the same survey, we'll kick it out, and get thousands of responses like this. We got thousands of responses because we advertised, we worked with third-party groups, we worked with all of our judges, and we pushed a card. So in the future, we need to get that a lot harder.
I think you're probably right, Daniel, that's sort of the way people respond to self-selected, isn't it? So it's an educated anecdote.
Yep, and also positive or negative. I got a feeling they have something they would want to say, but we didn't open it up to be something that we can't quantify. Because those open-ended questions become so hard to quantify. One person wrote this, and one person wrote this, which is similar, but not the same. Other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, so, non-multiple choice answers.
Like to do a more of like a focus group afterwards. It didn't have that included. And the big thing is the last time we ran this, we knew we would be using it for redistricting. And the specific questions we wanted were, how long is it appropriate to wait in line? This is a challenge. Our team in elections wants a 0-minute wait time. And as voters, they said 15 to 30 minutes. And then I'm like, oh, great, because that gives us a lot of wiggle room to find something in the middle. And then also how far are you willing to travel? You know, it was interesting because voters said 5 miles. And we said, I love that feedback, and we're gonna keep it a little bit tighter than that. 5 miles is everybody in Missoula city proper votes at one polling location. And well, that may seem like how far individually you want to travel. We use that to help gauge, but we didn't use that to say voters have said 5 miles, so all polling places are within 5 miles. Now, Dr. Barsky is more than happy to work on these in the future. And I think that's something we get absolutely bad is, hey, I'm interested in participating. That's something we do with a lot of other things. I'm interested in serving as a judge, learning more, serving on the EAC. And I'm interested in follow up for more because that could help us get to more focused groups in the future. I'm almost certain we didn't have it the last time. I have to look, to be totally honest. Because I know I'm going back to before a federal election. I do think that would be great to have in the future, just in general. If we ever do this, I'm interested in participating more, answering more questions, or more dedicated follow up. So, sorry, I don't have a ton more to give on that, but I do have more will be coming, and we'll have a little bit of an update. Anything else on that, sir? Is that available online? Yeah, so once we get that report out, we will post it. And so you can see the 2021 survey results. And that's going to be in that presentation area where you'll see the rough. And we basically copied that same 21 presentation. And so each time we have a quick update. So the best area to find these survey results from the last one we did is actually the election advisory committee meeting. Dr. Barsky, she used to work in the MBA program here at the university. I'd done a presentation really similar to what we were going to do now. I know that she's traveling now, so I didn't push it for getting into this, but I can update that and share that out both to the advisory page and make sure that it's fine. She did a really good update, walking through and explaining a lot of from somebody whose job it is to know and understand that better than me. Where I'm like, okay, can't extrapolate that information out, and Dr. Barsky, make sure I'm using that word right. So good info in that last meeting. Check our webpage presentations for detailed results report, and then the breakdown walkthrough is really in that meeting. And I would say it was a January meeting or an April meeting 2 years ago. Because I was like, I know I watched it to help update for this round. These are all pre-election. Okay.
Ready to move on to your report?
Yeah, so we tried something new. Normally, I've been recording an elections administrator update, working to get that information provided about a week ahead of the meeting. And then during the meeting, we would review the election administrator update as the big bulk of that. So we didn't record one and send it out. So we're recording it now. And I wanted to do a little bit of an update, and I've got a handout for everybody here. Sarah had sent it to those of you online, and it is also on our EAC SharePoint folder. Thank you. So quickly, I just wanted to start with reviewing the last election. And I was starting to type up a whole different review. Cammy, did you make it to our canvas this last run through? And I think you were there too. So we had a couple of members who came to the canvas. Other than the abridged version, I just provided the full canvas meeting minutes in here so that you can see all of the information that we provided out. And I'll do a quick run through of it, but I thought it's really important to see some of this process that we do to finalize and certify the election. So this is a big thing that's coming up at the legislature right now. And there's a few bills at the legislature that talk about this canvas process. And these were bills that when I looked at them, I said, not a material change to what we're doing. We can add it in. And so this feels great for me to look at a big process, see some big changes that legislators are looking at and say, I can make that work. So after the election, we came together, and it's usually about 2 weeks after the election This was the 18th of November. We have a meeting with elected officials. This is our canvas meeting, and the canvas is what makes the election results certified and official. This actually is what made every county race official. And we provide this information to the Secretary of State, and they review it all for the state before they make any state or federal races official. So when we do this process, I say, okay, you are running for the county attorney, you have been elected. We have certified you are elected. If you are running for the Secretary of State, we say, we're compiling all of this data and sending it to the state, who will audit it and compile it together, and they will issue that certificate. Before we do this, we talk about how the election went. And the canvas specifically is a process that makes sure that the number of ballots that were voted are the number of ballots that were counted, and none were missed or counted more than once. We do a little bit more in this canvas process, and that's some of the bills that we're looking at in the legislature, expand that a little more. So we talk about our turnout numbers. We talk about the number of registered voters, the number of voters that voted, and we talk about the number of ballots we accepted to the number of ballots that we counted. As we went through, we started with just some general numbers, and that's what's in front of you guys here for this canvas document. 95,000 registered voters, 77% voter turnout, information that helps explain this in overall numbers. We really worked on breaking out the turnout or ballot return rate between absentee voters and polling place voters, and trying to make that something that people can see uniform for every election as they move forward. Some great things to note in this election is we did pretty darn good. We had a ballot return rate that was pretty much on par with the federal general all-mail ballot election in 2020. 85% ballot return rate is pretty darn great. As we go through this, we also, some other numbers, we rejected 208 ballots because they voted multiple ballots, or they didn't return a ballot in the secrecy envelope, or return the previous election's ballot. So we opened up that envelope, and inside there is school election, no election, like something that's just empty. And we like to track that number and see, because it's important that we work hard to educate voters. That would obviously increase turnout. If you turn in the right ballot, we're going to count it, and that's going to increase your turnout. That's also not our biggest problem. We did have 1,881 undeliverable, and Cameo had asked me to do a little bit of the dig, and I have some pretty good numbers on undeliverable. But that left a total of 6,200 ballots that didn't get returned. That means not undeliverable, just out there, voters didn't return. We served almost 9,000 people during the late registration period. That is impressive. Hats off to everybody on their hard work on this. Sarah, Nathan, and Jill really did a great job of helping set up the program and run these teams. This is a lot of people. Every time we come to a federal presidential election, I forget quite how busy it's going to be. And I think that as we ran into this, we had a really unique staff where half of our team has been here for 2 federal presidentials, and half it was their first federal presidential. And so it was really interesting to kind of explore this. It was also the first polling place election in 4 years. What did that mean? We did a lot of work to help inform voters about moves and changes. And I don't think that was much of an impact for this cycle. We did a really good job of informing polling place voters of their polling place, letting them know they were a polling place voter, and then signing old polling places to direct them to the new polling location. So that wasn't a lot of feedback that we got. Look, I'm at the wrong location and you should have told me. That was a big fear that we had, knowing that we were moving polling locations ahead of one of our busiest years. As we go through, I'm kind of reviewing a little bit of these numbers, but I do want to point out our discrepancies. This is something we point out every election. And as we went through, when we were opening the secrecy envelopes, we had 4 ballots which we rejected because they had multiple voted ballots, another election, or didn't have one when we opened our secrecy envelopes. We had 1 voter. We're the only county that has gone through the process of allowing voters to hand count their ballots, and there's always something, do we want to change that? When we have 1 voter who requests their ballot is hand counted, it's not burdensome on us. it does create a secrecy concern for those potential voters, so we moved those in without provisional ballots. We allow that opportunity. But we ended up with 36 discrepancies that we flagged and pointed out to the Board of County Commissioners across this election when we were looking at the number of ballots we received in to the number we counted. And the way we track that is through the number that we had received from our voter database, as well as the number that we issued at the polling place, and then the number of ballots that our tabulators physically counted. Well, it makes sense for these numbers not to align perfectly. Rejected ballots due to not being being turned in too late, due to not having a ballot in the envelope. And then we run into other issues. Humans suck at repetitive tasks. Specifically, we have this with forms incorrectly labeled by workers. We tracked one of these errors, and at 1 a.m., the Wednesday after the election, we had a form come through that was a missorted ballot form. What that means is we're tracking which ballot style. We numbered them all 1 through 50, and this one should have been number 12. When it got added, it didn't get incorrectly rejected from the previous set. So what we see is that now there's 12 more ballots through this process of repetitive data entry that the humans made a mistake on. So in the Canvas board, we said, well, I have to present this data to you. Here is the form. I cannot find the associated form that rejects 12 ballots. So our numbers are off in this process. And we went through and showed every discrepancy and every counted ballot. And we went through to show, would there be a potential impact to the outcome of the election? And as we went through this process, we had 5/100% error rate, that human element, but none of them have an impact to the outcome of that election. So what that means is, okay, there's 12 ballots added to this ballot style, but if the closest race that's on that style is separated by 1,000 votes, we're not going to go back through to see, was it a data entry error on those 12? Or is it the fact that we've incorrectly accounted for them in a different spot? Because there's not an impact to that election, and rectifying that problem could take days of work. It could take a county attorney petition. It could take multiple different things to come up with those solutions. But as we go through this, we want to point out every one of those discrepancies. So every ballot we accepted and counted, there's 36 difference. Out of, back that up, 73,907. I'm really proud of the hard work that our whole team put together to get to that. And the issue that came up is, these are likely data entry errors happening by teams that are forced to count continuously at 1 o'clock in the morning. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the legislative fixes that we're working on that could help account for that. As we go through this process, this is critical. This shows that, yes, our election was valid. We do this for every election. We point out any discrepancies. And if one of these discrepancies was close enough to impact an election, there's two things. They can request to inspect those ballots or recount those ballots. And then our Canvas board can also go through and they can say that if it's so close that it could impact that election, we may be doing a hand recount of those ballots anyway. So within 0.5% is our recount threshold. And anytime a race is within that 0.5%, we would go through and we would put together the physical ballots. And we would hand count those election results. So there's so many redundant checks and balances that we were excited to present the small margin of error. We were very excited that that small margin of error didn't impact an election. And the board chose to certify this election. A lot of info in there. And for those of you who've been there, it's a lot of data. It is, see this report plus this report, it equals this total. Or this report plus this report does not equal this total, it's off by 2. And it could be this reason or this reason. However, the closest race is 900. So you need to know that no elections are perfect. Yes, we have checks and balances to ensure they're accurate. Before you can canvass, I almost missed this, you need to complete a post-election audit. So we successfully completed the post-election audit 2 days before the canvass of 7 different precincts. This process took us, what was it, 2 days, 2 full days. It was more than double our previous times, and we ran into the same thing. These processes have grown, and what happens is, as these processes grow, people wear down. And doubling the amount of time isn't enough to get it done. It's actually that you need to both either double the amount of time or add extra time for the slower processes in the future, because that process of hand counting and confirming those results, you're not, after you've done it 8 hours, you're not as quick as you were when you start. We did not have a single valid write-in vote for this election. Just something to kind of watch as we go through that. We made a change to how we count valid write-in votes. And with that change, as well as with the change to the process we use to track them, we were able to eliminate multiple teams of judges from this work, and it went really well. Questions about the canvas process? I thought it was kind of nice to show you and give you this kind of boring, but very in-depth review. Questions online, if I didn't bore you all to sleep.
The 208 ballots that were rejected, do you know how many of them were because of a mismatched signature versus KW8?
Yes. We do, and I can pull that up for you. We actually keep a whole list of the rejected ballots and the reason why. And so this is 208 that are at the end of the election. That's not, I mean, our rejected ballots, we probably had 300, 400, 500. But we're able to resolve things for a husband and wife switch, or if the signature just didn't match what's on file and they say, oh, yeah, I bet. And they fix it and they get it updated. So yes, I can pull that together and let you know.
These are probably mostly the ones that were at the last minute, were either dumped off at the polling place or they got here at the last.
And what's really nice is our spreadsheet actually tracks the date we received the rejected ballot, the date we contacted that voter. But what Cameo was referencing, just for everybody too, is that we're processing these absentee ballots for signature verification at 1 a.m. on election day. And then we're not contacting voters at 1 a.m. We'll contact them when we get back in 8 or 9 o'clock that next day. But then your time frame to get those resolved is, hey, Cameo, it's Bradley here in the elections office. It was about 3 a.m. We came across your ballot. You forgot to sign it. You have till 5 p.m. today to resolve that. And so there's not a lot of time. We encourage voters to turn them in as soon as they've made an informed decision because it helps catch that. Well, if they've called every single race at 11 o'clock at night when we counted your ballot at 3 a.m., if you get that message at 4 o'clock the day after the election, you're like, well, I've resolved it. It's already been called. It's already done. So those could definitely be due to that. Cameo, I'm happy to take a look at that. I need to trim some information out of that spreadsheet because it's got too much info.
Too much information for the general public.
But I could definitely have it be like the reason, the dates we contacted, when it was resolved, and we could produce that out. And I think just plug it into the documents in here, along with some of the other info, because it's so great to help figure out. And it kind of tags into how do we help people increase turnout? These are people voting. And if they voted and they turned it in earlier and they resolved it, great. 208, that might be diminishing returns, but I love tagging everything to increasing turnout.
And then, do you know, like, this is gonna sound weird, but the ballots that start getting counted on election day, how much a percentage of those are absentee ballots that came in before election? Is it most of them? Because it seems like you wouldn't count the poll ballots or the absentee ballots that were dropped off until the polls close.
Yeah.
So most of the work that's getting done on election day at the county is ballots that came in.
So the easiest way to explain it is on the Thursday before the election, we are opening secrecy envelopes and we can prepare everything to count on Monday. So everything we've gotten Thursday and Friday, we've prepared to count on Monday. On Monday, we're no longer preparing early, we're just counting those. So on Monday, the ballots we're counting are everything we received up to Friday before the election. And then we start counting the ones we received Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So on Monday, we're counting all of the ballots from before the election and some from Monday.
Okay,
On Tuesday, any remaining, we have to stop at 5 p.m. So we start at 9 o'clock, we test our equipment, and we count.
5 PM on Monday.
Yep. We count as much as we can on Monday from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. 2 hours of testing, 6 hours of counting. And we're doing a lot of ballots. I would say we had through over half of our ballots counted on Monday. On Tuesday is just the ones that are left over from Monday and that we received on election day. So I think I'm answering your question.
So now my question is, can you start counting on Sunday?
By law, we can't. So right now, the current law states that we can prepare on Thursday, we can prepare on Friday. You cannot open or prepare on Saturday or Sunday. And then you can count on Monday, but you must complete by 5 p.m.
Okay.
And then we begin again on Tuesday. Now, here's the thing. It doesn't make sense for us to begin on Tuesday at 8 a.m. Because on Tuesday at 8 a.m., we're going to start, we're going to count, and then we're going to catch up. And so we'll cut out that team and we'll ask for a new team to come back in. So we start at about 2 p.m. because we're required to run continuously. So by starting later in the day, we can get people who are hopefully a little bit fresher as we get up to 12 midnight, 2 a.m. And that really costs. The overnight shift was just not productive. It opened more errors and it was
So
a challenge.
you cannot absolutely count all the ballots by the stopping time after election day because of the provisionals and stuff that are left. Right? You can't. So when can you stop after that count? You start on Tuesday at 2,
Yep.
and then you have to go till all the ballots are counted.
So the language specifically is the all ballots that are legally able to be counted have been tabulated. And then it excludes resolution ballots, which would be a ballot that couldn't be read by the machine and needs to be reviewed. This would be if you voted for 2 people for the president. It's going to kick that out and just double check that it's not somebody tried to erase it. And it's picking up an erasure mark. Gold pen, it doesn't read gold pen, kicks out the whole ballot. And I can see how a voter may have voted. We can duplicate that and get that vote to count. Laws, federal write-in absentee ballots, and these are UOCAVA ballots that are coming through. Those are able to be held until Monday, and then provisional ballots must be held until Monday to be counted. So where that ended for us, 8:30, the day after the election, is when we completed our count.
So when you counted on, and you guys, if you're tired, this is here, but when you count on Tuesday, you start at 2.
Mhm.
Are you getting done with all those leftover absentees that came in? The leftovers from Monday, are you getting done with those like right at around 8:30, or is there a gap between 2 shifts there, or are you still running absentee ballots from leftovers at 9 o'clock at night?
It is hard to say because at that point in time, I can't link it to the actual time we received that ballot in. Without being like 100% accurate on every single ballot, we're done. We're down to Tuesday's ballots by 10 o'clock, and it's just Tuesdays. It's just what we received at the polling places on Tuesday. It's just what we received at drop locations on Tuesday. And the polling place ballots actually go very, very quickly. The big issue that comes in is that every absentee ballot dropped off must be signature verified, sorted, and accounted for. And as that process goes through, we need to scan and sort those and account for those. It takes about 2 hours per ballot. So if we're getting them at 10, the soonest we can get them to the counting center is 2 a.m. or it's midnight. Gosh, 10 p.m. would be midnight, 2 hours later. And then the soonest that we could really tabulate them after reopening them is about 1 o'clock in the morning. And the issue that really comes in is if we receive 4,000 ballots from drop locations, drive through everywhere, and we want to get as many ballots as we can. Well, that backlog, so each one takes 2 hours, but if you're not getting to this one until midnight, well, and then you're 2 a.m. and then 3 a.m. by the time you can open that, and everybody gets tired. Then what we saw is just that residual. The scanning became slow. The counting became slower because the scanning became slow. And then like what we ran into is just a spot where we didn't have enough people to keep enough things running through. Turns out it's really hard to recruit people for signature verification at 3 a.m. on election day, which is what we said when they proposed it.
Is there a solution in late registration? Is that where you would look to kind of come up with some sort of a solution to that?
So this is a challenge. And I think that the challenge really comes into you have limited resources in some capacity. Funding to pay for workers, the number of workers, and what jobs they do. So ideally, we want to balance and we want to provide. We have over 2,000 people who use same-day voter registration in Missoula. That's a service that if we can pull people from that, they can be scanning signatures. That's a finite resource. How many people do we have available? And we want to provide that resource that has been so heavily utilized in Missoula County to allow people to register and cast a ballot on election day. Yes, if you did not need to register voters and have issued a ballot on election day as late registration, you could use that to help process ballots. Would that necessarily accommodate for those received late? No. Would we catch up? We would be further ahead. That pool of resources would be available. What we ran into is that it wasn't so much the funding to be able to pay people, it was there weren't people. We could not get people to run overnight from 3 to 8 a.m. Both in our county center signature verification, we offered a shift differential of $7 an hour. And we still could not fill all of those shifts. So that resource for us, we're trying to balance providing that service to voters, providing timely election results, and the bigger resource for us is not so much funding to be able to fund and accommodate them, it's just that there weren't people to do that. So eliminating election day registration would not necessarily add too much to that pool of people from 3 to 8. And it's something that Missoula County has really supported, election day voter registration. So what is the solution for that? Don't run continuous count. Let people get some rest, come in at 8 o'clock the next day, and you can count on those people. You can count on them having rested, and you're not dealing with people who left at 3 o'clock in the morning and then are asked to come back at 9 o'clock the next day and are exhausted. And you have a little bit better setup and flow. The next area that makes sense is utilize technology for repetitive tasks. These require large scale changes. Do we need humans doing the data entry to repeat the process? Yeah, that's actually what the law specifically calls for. You are required to fill out that form and manually data enter it, and there's going to be errors that happen with that. The other areas that you could typically use technology for that would be a great idea to explore is signature verification. States have a program that allows signatures to be verified by computers. And rather than having a human look at it and try and make that decision as to whether or not that signature matches, you could load in every signature from the database, use the computer program and say if it meets this threshold, it is accepted. And if it doesn't, it goes out for additional review. And that eliminates a lot of that initial process and that initial work. And it's not yet approved for use in Montana. So these are the discussions we're having on a larger scale. It boils down to resources. In Missoula County, I don't want to allow computer to pay Paul. I don't want to take away from late registration to make processing ballots faster. And I don't know that it necessarily equates to one from here makes one to this next category. The larger scale is how do you do this? Well, you provide those counties that didn't have the resource of funding, that ability to utilize funding from state and federal programs, Help America Vote Act, and providing funding from the state to support elections offices. Where do you go next? Well, you look for ways to maximize technology to reduce that workload on humans, and then What are the other options? Well, we're gonna pursue some legislative options that are out there. But I can't guarantee that the legislature will go forward in any of those. So right now, there's a lot of providing information, providing why this is important, and helping you do the best we can to show information as to why that might be important. Trying to walk a fine line of not getting political as that goes through. So, Cameo, did I get your question?
Yep, you sure did.
You began, right?
Yes.
Did I get your question?
Yes.
Great. So that was a little bit about the last election run through and the canvas information. More questions about that from anybody? I lost my train of thought a little bit. I've got way more to cover, so I can kind of run through, noting that I'm going to be a bulk of this next steps in explaining this information. Give a second just to make sure everybody online is keeping up. Anybody have questions about that canvas process or that broader review?
I don't.
Perfect. I'll dive into candidate filing. This one's pretty good, pretty straightforward. We're in candidate filing and we're working on trying to grow engagement this year. Growing engagement in the federal year is always something that everybody wants to work on and work hard on. And guess what? The lowest turnout elections are arguably our school and special district elections, followed by our municipal election. Sarah's done an amazing job. If you guys ever see our reader board, you can clearly tell when Sarah took charge of that reader board from me. He used to say voter services in building A, and that was it, ever. And now we've got bouncing, we've got schools, we've got like things that draw attention. We're on one of the busiest streets in Missoula. We might as well utilize that to our advantage and letting people know candidate filing is open. These simple little things help. So candidate filing is currently open and the special districts. Special districts are volunteer or elected boards. The ones we're dealing with are all elected boards and they're usually all volunteer boards that serve for a purpose. And the biggest ones we're working on for special districts tend to be our community councils and our fire, water, and sewer districts. These are member boards that work to either serve as liaison between the commission and the general public, so that's a community council. Water and sewer boards are working with the local areas to make sure that if there's a separate water system, they're hooked up. If there's a separate sewer system, they're hooked up. These are elected positions. We're regularly canceling these elections due to lack of candidates who file. Over the last couple of days, this is so very recent, it was something that we were really looking at, and I was thinking, well, boy, as we're growing and we've got so many new members of our advisory committee, and our goal is to increase turnout in elections, what can we do to help people understand this year's elections that give us so much opportunity? Yeah, we can work to increase that voter turnout number from 77 to 78%. Or in this election, we could work on increasing it from 28 to 30, 40%. You know, like these have a lot more ability to impact than some of those other elections. One of the biggest things that we hear is, I don't know what these positions do. And you know what? I don't know what an irrigation board director does. And that is a position that's up for election. And so one of the things we were really contemplating is how do we help gain that information? So that's something we're looking at a little bit, and to stay in order, we want to work on helping kind of gain some information about this and share it out. And I'll chat with you about that a little bit later, but it's part of our candidate filing process and why we're excited to share more info. Special districts close next month. This period starts in December and closes in February. At the same time, we're running a school district election on the same day, but that candidate filing stays open much later. That candidate filing opens on the same day, but it stays open until the end of March. So there's some weird overlap that we have coming out with this, and our goal is essentially to help reach out to voters in the future and say, do you see this on your ballot? Well, this is what the Frenchtown Fire Board does, or Clinton Community Council, such a great example. This is what a community council does and the way it's involved. And so we're hoping to gain some more information about that. Now, in addition to school districts candidates filing, they have till mid-February to call for an election for a levy. This is due to when they receive their funding, but we may still get school districts asking to run a levy up until February 25th. So that information is really in flux, and I can't tell you what we'll be voting on in this next upcoming election yet, because we don't know if the school districts will run that levy. We don't know, currently, no districts have enough candidates to go to an election, but there's time to file. And then once we see that, we really want to help do some outreach to voters that said, the East Missoula Rural Fire District is on your ballot, and have you ever wondered what a fire district board director does? Here's Joe from the fire district to talk about what they do, and something that we might be able to host on our website that helps voters understand and know. Candidate filing is going to go through in about mid-March. We're going to start to get a really good idea of what elections look like and where we'll be able to hold elections, what our ballot drop-off locations will be, and what's going out to an election. Right now, we just don't know, but it's all up on the website and live. The other update is we worked hard to help provide a lot of information around candidates who file and access for the public. A lot of this has come from, since I started, central committees have had some sort of question of where do these people live? Are they filing in the right area? So we've scanned and posted all of our candidate filings to our website in the candidate filing spreadsheet, which has been a great tool for a lot of amazing transparency. In every single election, we get a phone call that states, I'm clicking this link and it's broken. We decided we're going to pull them all out of that filing and put the link to that folder on our website, but we're going to remove that from that candidate filing so it's still available. Every year we've gone through and we tried to fix links in here so that somebody can see when David filed for the Sealy Sewer District, was his address truly in that district? Well, yes, we can keep that here, but by pulling it out of that spreadsheet, it should help us with some integrity of our data so that nobody ever calls us and says, I've been clicking this link and it's just not showing me that. It'll look a lot like when you're looking for info on the EAC. You just click in and it shows you that folder and you can view it all. Questions about candidate filing? That was pretty quick and easy, hopefully.
I was looking at the spreadsheets that are on and I find them extremely confusing about what's actually open for running, what the terms are, how many people. It's, I don't know if you guys can clean it up, but some of it, it's like, we're not even sure there's an election this year. That's what it looks like to me. And I'm not, I can't be, but it just sounds a little vague, like so general, it's not, you're not sure whether that did, just.
It would be easier if there was just a list of the boards that have openings.
Well, I mean, yeah, if that spreadsheet's got a bunch of boards on it that doesn't have any openings on it, it would be good to at least put that on the spreadsheet that they're, and maybe that's what it is, it's a generic spreadsheet that gets used over and over again, and the instructions, you couldn't tell. I feel like you could be getting filings for stuff that's not even.
But it's just a list.
Oh, the way the spreadsheet tracker works.
So it's not a spreadsheet. It's,
On
on
the
the
county.
website.
On the county, yeah, so that links to the spreadsheet. There's no like actual list of just the boards that have certain files. So the spreadsheet, if it's blank, most likely means that no one has filed over a seat.
But when you read the instructions, it's like, maybe there's nothing to file for here.
Yeah.
Yeah, makes sense.
And everyone that's got a page should have something to file for. So I think one of the big issues is that on there's a spot that we list whether or not they confirm their information. And these boards are notoriously bad at confirming their information. And seeing that on there, terms have not yet been confirmed by the board, may make it really hard at somebody from the public And it's a challenge because I want to provide out this information. These volunteer boards haven't necessarily confirmed that information, and I don't want to be providing out bad information. We're going to use these for this cycle. But I'm like, what a good thing to look at, because on board, I think what you're talking about is on board, which will list every board that has a position that you can apply for. These are all the open positions in every board in Missoula County. And it would list like election advisory committee boards, it would list elected boards, like our community councils, our sewer water districts, but then it also lists boards that are not elected. And so that's why we're a step removed from it. The cemetery board is not an elected board, but it is an active advisory board. And so it's going to be included in that onboard program. I think it might be worth just taking a look at that and seeing what that looks like. Ideally, this information is really clear. And you click on this page and you know what is open for an election and what you can file on. This is so residual that we've done such a good job of tracking these boards that it used to be that we would have very different information. Now it's not very different. We've tracked them through this onboard program where I can almost guarantee, and guess what, if it does differ, you missed a step. And once you fix that step, we'll apply for that position. So I'm wondering if we can ditch that out to say, here's the list of every position that's open. And then here's the filings for those positions to make it a little clear. This is hard because what makes sense to me.
Yeah, I was thinking you should try logging in on there without your credentials and just see what the public sees on. And not, I don't really know how all that stuff goes. I think I would even try to file for one of these because I can't figure out what this means.
That's really good feedback.
You know,
I
I mean,
appreciate it. It's just like something that's been done for you.
yeah, and I'm like, I know that spreadsheet so well that I'm like, I'm not the guy to look at that. I'm like, the person to look at that is you and be like, hey, this spreadsheet doesn't make sense to me. And I'm like, okay, great. Because I've read this since 2016 and it's the exact same spreadsheet. And so this is a good time to look at that and then approach that. Obviously, we're not catching it for this. We may be able to catch it for municipal. Because the list for municipal is so clear on that spreadsheet. The list for municipal is smaller. Like, it's one of each of these positions and then the mayor, but it's not like this board has this term to this year and this board has this term to this year, where it's like, look, this is the term, this is the position, and I think it can be clear.
Yeah. I'll see with Excel sheets, so I think Excel would be helpful.
I also get a message that says I have to sign in this year. Which I just click on it anyway, and then it finally, comes up. It's like it doesn't really care, but it is throwing out a warning that might turn people off.
Yeah, I wonder what it'll take like that. I think that's a great one to hit. And I mean, candidate filing for the city, open state. So obviously I don't want to change what we have out for those boards that are closing in a month. But the ones that they haven't filed yet, I'm like, hey, and the reality is the city is a great time to look at a change like that, because if we want to roll it out, I want a uniform. And the big one's always going to be our school special district. The other ones aren't hard. School special district becomes the hardest and most challenging because it's each school board in each special district. And you guys have been hearing your for water sewer boards, those only run on even numbered years. So, it's so confusing about which districts run and where. I like that. Other info on candidate filing, give people online a chance too. All right, I'm going to dive into the next project because I don't want to go too long. I want to talk about what NDRA is and the process we're currently underway right now. This is the biggest project we have ongoing right now for the elections office as a whole. NDRA refers to the National Voter Registration Act. It's a series of federal laws that have overlapping state laws. These require us to do updates to voters. And you can think of this as a 2 or 3-part project. Part 1 is taking a look at our voters that have been in an inactive status. So that means that they didn't respond to multiple mailings and they're inactive. You have to be inactive and remain inactive for 2 federal general elections. So what that means is if somebody was inactivated before November 2022, and they missed 22 and 24, the first step of that process is going to be moving them from inactive to cancel. An inactive voter is considered an eligible voter right now. There's like 6 of these bills that are out here that are all looking at definitions of voters, but they're considered eligible. And so an inactive voter can do things like sign a petition. They can appear at the polling place on election day and update their information and vote a regular ballot. So that's a very specific group of people, but they're not sent a ballot in a mail ballot election. And that's why you hear me talk about a ballot return rate all of the time. Now, we go through and we have moved 5,800 voters from inactive to cancel. That's step 1. Step 2 is to send notices to voters to make them inactive. So it seems out of order, but it's really specific as it follows those steps. So the National Voter Registration Act, we got a couple of different ways we can do this. We're going to look at voters that didn't vote in the last federal general election. That means you didn't vote in November. You didn't know the November election was happening. This is a great reason to reach out to, you know. So if you didn't vote, we're going to send them a postcard. And that postcard is going to say our records indicate that you did not vote in that election. And that's important because that could be one of those 208 people whose signature didn't match what's on file. It could be somebody who dropped off a ballot just in a blue secrecy envelope, so we didn't know that they tried to vote and we couldn't count it. It could be somebody who voted and we didn't get them the credit correctly at the polling place. So we've got a lot of info here. They get a postcard, it's forwarding service. So that the postcard has just gone out to voters. They should start seeing them any day now. 30 days, they'll get to respond to that. And they can reply back to us and it's going to say, cancel my registration, I've moved out of the county. It's going to say, keep me active, I'm here and I'm ready. Or it's going to say, cancel, inactive. The third option that we get is it's return to our office undeliverable. So that means that there was no forwarding service, it just came back and it could not be delivered. If they don't reply or it gets returned to us as undeliverable, in 30 more days, they'll get a second notice. Same thing. Says you didn't vote in this election, we're sending you a second notice to confirm that you want to update your information or stay here. At the end of that 30 days, any voters who did not respond or have that mailing come back undeliverable are moved to inactive. And then they stay there for 2 federal general cycles, and then they're moved to cancel. So we do this process every 2 years.
So the people in this 7,000 are the people who have the 60 days.
Yep.
Plus the people who have been declared inactive.
No, just the active people.
Ah,
And so then those inactive just sit in there, and then the first step is to go back. Are you inactive? Have you been inactive for 2 full federal general elections? This is important. At the legislature and here locally, there's a lot of discussion about challenges to voters. And Missoula County received an Excel list of 476 voters, something like that. And it was based off of this process. They had been in an inactive status, but you must remain in an inactive status for 2 federal general elections. So what does that mean? Adrian, if you move and you don't respond to these mailings, you're going to go inactive. And then if the next election comes along and you want to vote, you're going to reactivate. And then you're going to vote. And then that's going to start your timer all over again. You have to be inactive and remain inactive for 2 federal general elections. Most of the voters on this list provided to us had reactivated at some point in time. And so the data points didn't align. Yes, they may have been inactive 6 years ago, but they need to stay inactive. On this date, they reactivated, they voted in this school election, and then they had an undeliverable ballot. They were again re-inactivated, and they must remain on that list for 2 federal general elections. So this is really specific, and people lose that information. They say, well, you're inactive and you missed 2 elections, you need to be canceled. You need to remain inactive for those 2 cycles. That's something that's active at the legislature right now that we're working on helping inform our citizen legislature about the difference between inactive and missing 2 cycles, remaining inactive for 2 federal elections. So 5,800 went from inactive to cancel, 7,000 are sent a postcard. Now, that may be that, nope, I'm here, I just missed the election, oops. That may be, no, I moved to another county and we'll help get them updated, or it may be, no, I moved out of the state and canceled. From there, they go to inactive, and that inactive status is critical because it allows them that ability to reactivate. They're registered, they just need to reactivate.
Right, so this process, the cancellation and activation process, that's spelled out by the National Labor Administration and state law, the timeline, the process.
Yes, exactly. And then state law doubles this. We do this every year. So it's really interesting. In our state law, we're going to do a very similar process in the odd years. It's an odd year, we'll do it in the even year. So, and that's based off of did your address match what's on file with the post office. So Montana has doubled it. This particular section we're looking at falls into the federal requirements. And that's so important because Montana law can't supersede the federal law. We can't make something more restricted than the federal law is. It can't be like you were canceled after being on there for 1 election. That law would not be valid. Questions about NVRA? None of you should see this postcard because this is only sent to people who did not vote in the last federal general election year. And if you do, reach out to our office because we probably have a data entry issue. I wanted to hit on polling place relocations too, and then switch to, I'm not going to go through every single bill on this, but I want to hit some broad topics. Polling place relocations. We've been working closely with School District 1 over the course of multiple different years. We have utilized, Rebecca knows this very intimately, we utilized many different locations, and recently we've done a big transition to transfer out of School District 1. This is Missoula County Public Schools. So like, this is different than Clinton Elementary or like Lolo or Hellgate Elementary. This is specifically certain schools. They've asked us to not use schools where students are in session as polling locations. They were the bulk of our polling locations, and we worked closely with them. And in 2024, we narrowed it down to 4 locations. We have the admin building, which is over on South Avenue. We have the former Cold Springs building, which is over by the Walmart on Brook.
Old Walmart.
Yep, thank you. You can see me get over my head, yes. And then we used CS Porter Middle School and Lowell Elementary School. We worked closely, and the principals had actually worked with us to keep this in that location. It is a direct security concerns for students versus open access for voters, and they asked us about 2 months ahead of the election to pull out of those. And we said, we are on that process, but if it's at all possible, we'd love to keep them. We worked with you on this process of redistricting, and we would love to keep them. We understood that this was the long-term plan, but we thought this was like the 10-year plan. They said, keep it through this election. And just today, I did the start of our outreach to pull out of those 2 buildings. What does that mean? We're going to need to update voters about a new polling location. The first time they will use a polling location in those districts is going to be 2026. Lowell School is very easy. We've already relocated from that during the construction. So many of these schools went through construction. So we were asked to leave while they were going through construction. There is a Northside Community Development Center out there. It used to be Burn Street Bistro. They hosted us when it was a restaurant because they really wanted to be involved. We're going to look at working with them in the future. We still need to nail down locations and make sure they're available. CS Porter becomes a challenge. The location of that CS border is very unique and there's not a ton of public buildings there. So we're gonna start exploring the Target Range Elementary School, elementary and middle school, I believe is both. They've been very receptive towards allowing us to utilize their gym. This could double the number of voters they see, so we're always really cautious about that. We're gonna be working closely on that. Sarah is the deputy who does the polling locations, and so I've been working a little bit with School District 1. I was like, we're gonna have some great meetings to go through this, and I realized we did not need a meeting to tell them, yes, we will leave the schools you asked us to leave. Where do they go? Yes, order and will be things that we keep you guys apprised of in our discussion, ask you for our feedback. Hey, where could we send voters? This is the number of voters we're looking at. Where could we send them? We have time to look at this decision, but we know we'll be relocating those 2 locations. Questions about that process?
Is that gonna change the precinct names?
You better believe it, because we named them based off of the school that it's at and the precinct, and so to help with that, we're just gonna rename them. And so that will be an added expense for us. We're gonna need to mail voter confirmation card to all of those voters, and that's gonna need to change. So right now, Target Range 90 or CS 497 is that one. And Lowell has 3 precincts that all vote at Lowell. Because we label our precincts based off of where they vote in the House district, we will update it. So if CS Porter becomes Target Range 97 and there's already a Target Range 97, it would be Target Range 97 C or B, or there's already an A and B, a Target Range, so that's why we see. Lowell, depending, it may be really easy. It may be that we change the name Lowell to whatever that building is called, that makes sense to people in the community and the numbering stays the same.
So Target Range is way down South Hampton from CS. When you guys are looking for space, what are we looking for?
So that's one of the things I need to pull the numbers on, but that's the biggest thing is what I need to say is how much parking and how much room do we need? The best election to base it off of is the last election. So if I tell people that in the federal presidential election, this is what we're looking at, the number of voters voting at the polling place is continually going down. So if I say, base it off of this last election, and we have more voters than left to the absentee, that's kind of the big thing. I believe at CS Porter, we had about 300 voters vote there. I have to pull to be specific.
Because it would make sense to look at maybe one of the buildings in the fort or fire hall or, you know, something like that right there. Or.
Because there's school district 1, the exact same issue. There's I don't know. And so we have done a really good job. What I need to do is really figure out the number of voters, the number of staff, because the biggest hiccup we run into is where do people park? Community? Does community have a meeting room?
Hospital.
They do have some conference rooms and they may have a classroom in the new art center that they work.
And the question is it easy to get to? The last thing I want to do is, okay, so you're gonna be voting at community. Go in, push the elevator button 7.
Yeah, there's 15.
You know, like, which door do you go to? There's a lot to look into. The biggest thing that we need to see is if we have 300 people who vote there, we know how many people they'll see throughout the day. We know how many staff we need there all day. And I guarantee you that they're busiest from 7 to 9 and 5 to 7 and a little bump at lunchtime. But there needs to be parking for everybody. So a good example is when Hawthorne School wasn't available and we didn't, we now use Lifelong Learning Center. My apologies, I completely missed Lifelong Learning Center as a building that School District 1 graciously lets us use.
400 is good for.
Those 400 people coming throughout the day. That's not a ton throughout the entirety of the day. In the primary, it's a joke. In the general, it needs to be able to establish that, hey, if there are 30 people there at the same point in time, we're parking for all these people. There's a clear path. It's accessible. And we went through this when we looked for places. And there's a reason we asked to keep CS1. But we need to be working with our partners, you know what I mean? Like, part of what we looked at was like, okay, what if we go across Reserve Street? Well, that doesn't work out very well, so we kept that as a dividing line. We have a little bit of time to look at it, but with 400 people, the number of judges is pretty easy. We have 2 tables. So the maximum number of judges we'd have is 9. That's like plenty of cushion for that location. 9 people for staffing, that's 9 vehicles throughout the day. And then we need room for voters, so we'll say 20 parking spaces in addition to that. We need a place that's 30 parking spaces. That's where I started. Then I also needed to be ADA accessible, open to the public, and willing to work with us on those dates. And it's really a little bit before and after because we need to deliver supplies. I'm convinced there's something we can find.
So what is open to the public meeting?
So to me, what that means is, if the meeting room at community is on the 8th floor and you need to get buzzed into that location, that wouldn't be a good spot to have it. Open to the public for me means basically, ideally, it's not someplace that I'm gonna have to rent, which we may have to, and someplace that doesn't have barriers towards entry. Thank you, Cameo, for helping me clarify that, because,
It's huge too.
oh, and the 30 parking spots is where I started. Also, let's be really fair, where were those at CS Porter? In the community. So like, you know, we have some flexibility, you know, we've used elementary schools for so long. There's no parking lots in elementary schools. Where's that parking? In the community. But what does that mean? If everybody has to park across Reserve Street, that's not a good location for us.
So just historically, have you looked at the fort to see if they have a building?
I haven't. I loved it because the redistricting is done once every 10 years. The last person who did this before me was Vicky Zier. So it had been quite some time since anybody had got the pleasure of looking at all of the different polling locations. We got kind of caught in that area. And so that was one of the outreaches that we did. I think it's Ty Solmer was their principal. He was so great to work with that, you know, there were 2 principals that were awesome to work with. They were like, hey, can we make this happen? I understand that fully because those principals are like, yeah, this is great. And then the whole district says, we need to prioritize safety and security. And guess what? They're both right.
So they use them 2 or 3 times a year, 2 times a year for the elections.
Are there any rules, election law regarding using a church?
No, in Missoula County, here's the biggest issue that has come up. There are some communities that may feel not as welcome in the church area. So we've used churches, we tend to use it as our last resort. I want everybody to feel welcome. We want everybody to feel like there's nothing that would make them uncomfortable in this location. So no, there's definitely nothing that prohibits it. We just try to work on that, especially with the fact that there are travel items that were incorporated inside of and some of the specific concerns in that community. We're really cognizant of it. That being said, every time that we've gone to a church, it's been very great to coordinate and work with them. We just want to make sure everybody feels welcome. So with that, the best location in that community, in that area, that's something great to explore. I'm going to be very politically correct.
That was a great job,
Yeah.
Same thing with our Christian.
And we've done it. I've been a part of it. I've really made that to be a priority when I looked at this next area. It's just so nice to be able to say, yeah, we took that into account. The reality is ADA accessible is not the game. That's one of the things we need. And then I start with for 30 people. Our judges and people all being there at the same time. From there, let's see what's out there. And that's really going to be how I start that hunt. There's nothing more to it than that. And asking people who are familiar with that area.
So maybe the Missoula Country Club, it's on the other side of Larchmont Golf Course, they got a big parking lot. I'm pretty sure it's
Probably as much like a longer distance than going down the Larcher range.
Yeah, I was just thinking Larchmont, and I was like, what if you just did it at Larchmont? Doesn't it go to Larchmont? I was like, could we just take over the country club for a couple of days? Or I really don't know what that's like.
Right.
I think there might be a lot of that.
That's actually a really good idea. I think TNRC does have a room, conference room.
Is that like by kind of almost tower over there? Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, that's actually a really good idea. But I can reach out to, I know a couple of executives at CMC, or community, whatever it's called now, and see if they have a room level classroom, that may be an option, and I can forward you the information if it is.
Yeah, I'm like, ideally, roughly out of this, and I gotta keep us moving forward as I look at our stopwatch here. Buildings that don't charge, that aren't hard to get into, ADA accessible is a must. And then parking prepared. And then anything we can find. The reality is we don't need to nail this down and make those changes until we gear up for the next federal cycle. But I'm looking at this now because it's not something I want to be delaying until the next federal cycle. Okay, I'm gonna hit this legislative update very quickly. When I ran these numbers on Friday, there were 231 bill drafts. Legislators are able to request 3 bill drafts after that last deadline, so it could be more. All of these have a tag of elections. Some of these may not even get language. So there's some of these that I'm reviewing that was literally, I just spoke with the sponsor and they're pulling the language, you'll never see this bill again. Cool. I have plugged in here a very broad overview, and I want to just kind of run through them very, very quickly. There's a bill out for levies in dollars rather than mills. This could advocate clarity. School election judges needed to be election judges from that school district. When you contract with Missoula County to run that, we provide election judges that are trained in the county. This is our bill. We want school election judges to be able to be any trained election judges in the county. There's a bill that would ask you to vote to retain a county attorney if they were unopposed. There is a bill that clarifies that the county attorney office, not the election administrator, reviews a local government petition. I'm just reading through each of these. Guys, I'm just gonna read these all. Let me know if you have like bill topics you're interested in or specifics. So AI disclosures, this would be that this ad has been produced with the use of AI, and it would be required on all political ads, and it would be shipped to the Commissioner of Political Practices to look at. We support that for more clarity. In Missoula County, our office, as well as the Association of Clerk and Recorders, it's neutral on anything that pertains to partisanship. So partisanship of judges and justices, we will be neutral on. The judicial review is basically that they want to provide out a large judicial review. The reason this is tagging us is that may be included in the voter information pamphlet. Counties pay for the cost to mail that pamphlet. If that pamphlet doubles in size, that could be a substantial cost to us. So we're tracking that to see where that ends up. In committee review of statewide ballot issues, is a neutral, becomes a political item. We want to just watch this because if these ballot issues go through committee review, they are going to re-review ballot language, and this pushes up on the times which ballot language must be certified to print. We're just watching that. The county canvassing procedures and vote count procedures, I wanted to hit on these briefly. This came out of, there was a select committee at the legislature. There was issue of youth silver vote. They had accidentally, inadvertently reloaded their test results into their data and produced an election result that had 1,100 ballots more than what they had received. This should have been noticed in the canvas, and there's a lot of work going into confirming that canvases mirror what I walked you through. That's why I spent so much time walking you all through this, is to show you a rough example of what we do. The county canvassing process would be that we would include the number of registered voters in our county canvas, and if the number of ballots we received exceeded the number of registered voters, the canvas could request a recount at that point in time.
Who knows?
If I had that issue, we would present that in our canvas discussion. That's why I was trying to build that one in. The revised vote count procedures was essentially that if, as we went through, and I didn't get to do the full robust discussion, if we had a discrepancy in our reconciliation, what we talked about, those 36 discrepancies, we would be required to point those out to our commission. We already do that. And at that point in time, the commission would have the option to just instantly request a recount. I'm so sorry. Request a recount. Or an inspection of those ballots so we could count to confirm those numbers. That was a huge concern for me because we have errors every single election. The very next line in that bill goes on to say, unless there would be no impact on the election results, and that's usually how I run the canvas. Yes, there is a discrepancy. Yes, we have counted 2 more ballots than we should have. No, there is not an impact to the election results. The closest race is 1,000 vote spread. Those 2 ballots are not going to impact that at all. That is critical for that language. Doing all of this should be in there. It should be included, and that we had no concerns with this. It's really great to turn around and say, yes, we want to support you making elections more secure. We have no concerns with those. Revised county clerk and recorder election laws. Forgive me, I hope I have the right one right here. This was, you can't remove an election administrator from a clerk and recorder during their sitting term. Voter registration laws to include party preference. This is, you get your reflected by party. This bill does not include a closed primary, like if you are registered as a Republican, you only get that ballot. When we came to party preference, the information we're going to provide to the county is a little bit different than what the county may provide elsewhere. Voters have let us know time and time again that they appreciate the secrecy included with the open primary system of not having their party affiliation be public information. I appreciate the secrecy of your party affiliation not being public. Regularly, when there's an issue, a voter may say, you're doing this to me because I am a, and I say, well, I would not know whether you are a, we don't track it at all. It's completely secret. The only way we would know is if you volunteer that information forward. The official stance is neutral. We really appreciate that secrecy.
Isn't that just voluntary though? It's,
It would not be required. It is an
you
option.
can do it if you want to.
Yep.
And why would you?
Well, then the next step that comes in is that confusion at the polling place. As an election judge, you've been through all of this robust training and you're now in the register with an R after your name, meaning to make sure that those election judges know that it does not matter whether there's an R, a D, a P, whatever, you get every ballot. The confusion with this is, to me, this should go hand in hand. Closed primary, party affiliation, and they go in together. Voters appreciate the secrecy. We appreciate the secrecy. It tends to be that these are political hot potatoes that's best to remain neutral on. Ballot form and uniforming. This one's really interesting. This is a request and a requirement that county does not need to stamp every ballot with official ballot. We currently go through and every single ballot that we process, we stamp official ballot on and proceed out. The title of the ballot is official Missoula County ballot. A little bit a lot of duplicated work to put that on there, and we already account for every ballot we've ordered, purchased, printed, used. So they're looking at that. Didn't come from elections, but
So they're looking to get rid of that or?
yeah, we're gonna walk that back. And the discussion was to print it, pre-print it on there, and I was like, why pre-print it? I don't need to add an official ballot and image. It says official Missoula County ballot on the title.
Who brought that bill?
Let me let you know where that one came from. I can't do it. It'll make things too rough. I will follow back up on that one. I love it. This is literally an abridged spreadsheet where I have that on the next area. I just didn't want to pull it up. They gave us 2 extra days to publish our notices. Revised elected official recall laws. no longer would require a reason for a recall. We're gonna oppose that. That's called a vigilant election. A recall is very specific. It is because you're not doing your job. Revise the laws related to election hearing at polling places. This one's really unique and interesting. The law is currently that you cannot do anything on election day. This would make it so that you could not do anything as soon as ballots are available for in-person voting through the election. So when you come into the late registration office, it officially prohibits electioneering. We'll ask a voter not to wear a hat or a button, but if they give us pushback a week ahead of the election, we can't forbid them to. So if you came in and you said, you're wearing your hat for candidate A, we'd say, hey, your hat has the election info for candidate A, would you mind taking that off? And if you told me what you thought about that, I would say, well, you know, it's okay, it just might influence others and we want this to be really free from influence. When it's election day, you can't wear that hat. This would clarify that. The problem is that the way the bill is written, you can't wear that hat in local school for 28 days ahead of the election. I don't know that I really care. And it's a great bill and I don't want to put an amendment forward that makes that a challenge. Provide laws related to levies and bonds. This requires a participation and a turnout threshold. So that there must be X number of people and it must be X threshold. This one's still being drafted, all it needs to say LC. I am having some hard time finding this. Travis, I might reach out to you later. This LC 1219, it is a large scale request for more support and ability for people who are hard of hearing. We did a lot of outreach in the last election with Disability Rights Montana, the Secretary of State, and other groups. What more could we be doing? And so if this would cement it in code, that's great. Also, I wouldn't want it to prohibit what we're doing. The 1219, you're awesome. Let's see. Revise laws related to the conduct of school elections. This one is coming forward and this is going to change dates. We still need to read this. There's going to be laws that change dates for school elections. And we're going to defer to the schools on these a lot because there's specific requirements.
That just. Let's get it just for your.
Okay, so the way that, yes.
One who decides that we're being neutral.
So the way that I will provide out information is I've been requested to provide information in two ways. One to the Association of Clerk and Recorders and serving on their legislative committee. That's separate from this. When I talk about us and R and I am asked by the County of Missoula to provide information and what it looks like from the elections viewpoint on each of these bills. This may not be the viewpoint the county takes. So where I say voters appreciate the secrecy that comes from not declaring a party, the county may say, but we want it this way. Another area where you might see that is if we like that voted levies come out in dollars rather than bills, because voters might like that. Well, the county might say that, you know, for our admin, for our team and our accounting, we prefer it this way. Great, I'm providing you my recommendation as the elections administrator and a professional in this realm, what we feel for elections. The county may overrule that, and then sometimes you hear me blur a little because there's the Association of Clerk and Recorders. There is never a Missoula County election bill, so whenever you hear me talk about our bill, they're all Association of Clerk and Recorder bills because just to help with the success of them, we want to run them through the Association of Clerk and Recorders. Did I get your question pretty well there?
Yeah.
Great. Preparation for primary, haven't read that one yet, still getting information. Signature gatherers to be Montana citizens and voters, you must be registered voter in Montana to collect signatures. Ballot issue signers to be active registered voters. This one's going to be a political hot potato. This came up last year. There were a lot of legal court cases. We're going to let them figure this out. The only recommendation that Missoula County will provide to the county and the association is that, yes, Mirror it for both. If only active can sign a petition, then only active should be considered in the qualifications for the number of signatures needed. You guys pick whatever you want. Active and inactive can sign, and they're both included in those qualifications, or just active. No fish in the fight, just make sure that it's uniform for both the qualifications for what you need and who can sign. Party preference, this is mirroring the previous party preference. There are two bills from two different legislatures that want the exact same thing. It does not go to a closed primary. It has the exact same language in there. Compensation for EA duties. If you are a county where your clerk and recorder and elections administrator are combined, you receive a $2,000 a year stipend because that is how much the difference should be for doing elections in your county. It is not a fair breakdown and an accurate accounting of how much work and time goes into for this. The Association of Clerk and Recorders is likely going to support this gently. They don't want to come in and be like, hey, that's more. Missoula County is probably not going to reply at all because it does not impact Missoula County. And some interesting guidance that came out of reviewing it with our team here. It might make sense instead of doing a 100% increase once every time that the legislature has its stomach to do this, make it a percentage on a regular basis that counties could budget for and account for in the future. You don't want to propose an amendment to something that is basically a thank you for the hard work that elections administrators are doing that tanks this bill. But boy, it would be great for counties to not be like, now I need to double that amount of funding. And when you're tight on your budget and the legislature says you're now going to double that, that could be an issue. So a great way to kind of proceed forward. Okay. I want one more, and then I'm almost done and ready to shut up, guys. But I knew I could talk about elections for a while here. Undeliverable. I tried to compile in some numbers and some information, and I ran into a lack of information being able to come out of the database on historic elections. But one of the big things we were looking at was how do we increase turnout? Well, mail service. Where is this mail service? And we have this anecdotal number, and I hear it regularly. Cameo and I dug into it for a few voters in the election. I'm not getting the ballot that I asked for, or I'm getting more, or like what's going on with this mail? And the idea was we wanted to dig into and start figuring out how many people are being missed through mail service. Am I doing a good job of explaining this? Yeah, okay, just making sure I'm going that way. Like, how many people are being missed through mail service? One of the great things to look at is I put in every federal general election going back to 2020. And I'm looking at the very last column on undeliverable ballots and absentee ballot information. That number is pretty much dropping. That's really nice because guess what? Starting in 2021, we got yearly list maintenance that we were starting to do. We approved the yearly list maintenance. We thought this would be a good way to lower the number of absentee ballots that are returned as undeliverable. Here's where this data gets to be a little bit rough. Well, out of this, I know that we have 1,881 undeliverable ballots that were scanned into the system and remained in that undeliverable status. How many voters said, no, my absentee ballot should go to 123 East Street. You sent me a postcard saying my ballot was not deliverable to 123 East Street. That's the data that Cameo is really digging for that we could not pull out and get together. This election was not the time for us to pivot and start collecting new information. Really proud of all the work that we did. That's what I see as being some of these next steps to figuring out where that comes through. How many people are truly impacted, just mail service. I'm registered, I'm at the right place, I'm just not getting what I'm looking for. Well, one of the numbers that can help us with this is the number of people who voted a provisional ballot for the reason that they claim was due to not receiving an absentee. Not everybody who has an undeliverable ballot is the person who's voting due to not receiving an absentee. That may be, I thought that was a sample ballot, it's on my counter at home, and I just came to vote. Here at the polls today. Well, Adrian, I need to make sure that you didn't vote that absentee ballot. I'm going to have you vote provisionally. You're going to get a letter that lets you know which ballot was accepted. you're absentee, or you're one from here at the polls. That doesn't necessarily mean that that ballot's not delivered to them, not received, and not pulling through. So the data that we're really trying to get, how many people are not getting the ballot that is mailed to them at that right house address is kind of what we're digging into. And I was hoping to pull up more info on that. You know, we talked about doing a focus group, reviewing and seeing. I love the numbers dropping down. That shows that we're doing good work. The number of voters is going up, and we'll always see that in the midterm. Our midterm numbers should always be higher. Why? Because people aren't bombarded with this federal presidential election information like they are in the federal presidential. They're updating their information, they're reaching out, and the interest level is so much higher when it's the federal presidential compared to the midterm election. We're looking good. Now, Cameo, the next step comes in. As we start to pull this, do we want to be digging in more? Is this more, or do we really want to be digging into those that we have sent a notice and reconfirming about, like, in the next election cycle, this cycle, everybody gets an absentee ballot. Do we want our office to look and track how many people have contacted us to get a ballot resent to the same address?
That is my question.
Yeah.
People that would have gotten a ballot, should have gotten a ballot, and then say they never did. Is it them or is it the mail?
So,
So we had 6,200 and some that went out as absentee that we didn't get back.
mhm.
So of those, how many people just didn't vote or didn't get a ballot? They never got a ballot. That's my question. Because we don't know.
Ooh, I like it. Because that one's slightly different. And this is the exact same thing that I was struggling with so much more last time. This is the number that I don't have listed on here on this spreadsheet anywhere. The number of ballots that were not returned, not undeliverable, just not returned. And is that because they're not voting or because they're not getting it?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay,
Are they not getting it because they're not, or not voting it because they're not getting it?
so I have a list. I can pull that list. These are the voters that were sent an absentee ballot and their status is sent.
So they got it, but they should have gotten a postcard, right? That said you didn't vote.
Well, so now, that's what just went out to everybody there that didn't vote. So those 6,800 that were on that list, plus those polling place voters and whatever that crossover is, everybody who didn't vote gets that postcard. Now, many of them who didn't vote, they have already moved to another county
Right.
and you just got
Well, it's
crossed.
interesting if any of them come back and say, I didn't vote because they didn't get a ballot, you know.
So as we go through this, we can track right now, as those calls start to come in, so it's about catching these data points. And one of the things I realized is getting data points in the federal general election can be really hard for our office. And I had illusions of grandeur coming into this, and now I'm very much realistic as to where we're at. For this process, we could track. Please let us know if you receive a call from a voter, an email from a voter that says I received this. And it's because I did get a ballot. That would be people who got contacted from us who didn't vote in this last election. And that's a good way of helping capture that data point. The next thing we can do is track the deliverables that we're resending to confirm whether or not it's the same address on file.
Mhm.
That's gonna be so much easier to do in this school district election than the federal general, because we simply didn't have the staff. So we didn't have that research and review. Does that help get us to what the info we're looking
Yeah,
at?
I hope so. I mean,
Okay, so did that make sense to you? Because this would be an ask for our team if we get that request in, and then the next would be is once we start receiving absentee. Thanks. No, you're fine, it's, you know me in talking elections, I'm sorry, everyone.
well,
Um,
Thank you.
so that's a data point we can track, thank you, Susan. We can track that data point for the next few months. Easy peasy.
Do we know if that's been an issue with the pregnant place? Sitting there about it?
Yeah, so when I worked at Lowell, and there was a lot of people that said they never got a ballot. Now, I don't necessarily believe them, but when a friend of mine who was a state senator said he didn't get his ballot and his girlfriend did, then I'm like, there's something going on. There's at least one
Yeah.
that would have known.
Changing things about that I worked on some photo stuff last summer and I have a lot of feedback from just regular citizens. And they were genuinely confused as to where, well, how, what dates are for this sort of thing. For absentee versus going in and what is late registration and what are the dates on that? A lot of people were confused. Including me.
Mhm.
Anecdotally, I think it's the fact that we have some elections that are mail ballots. And people are saying they're all gonna be mail ballots. And so I didn't get a ballot. Well, because you're supposed to go to the polls. That's what your card says.
Well, other than the one that Cameo, say, that the ones that I ran into was like, well, here, let's pull it up and see how you should get your ballot.
Yeah, that was a good tool.
Yeah.
And it's all of it. If there is confusion, it is trying to make this information, the late registration deadline, mail ballot election, absentee ballot, making this information digestible to your average Joe. Mail services, I mean, like, is mail actually making it there? And then the other side, Cameo and I dug into somebody and they were like, I got 10 ballots. And we looked it up and I was like, there's nobody registered at that address. There's no ballot sent to that address. Like, let me pull up and see anybody else that might be at that address. And you know, this could be junk mail
Yeah.
that looks like official mail. And so finding out what Cameo is looking for is a challenge. And it's also kind of what we're here to do. If we can increase turnout by making sure that people requesting ballots are getting their ballots, great. And finding this data is really hard. And so our 2 points we're gonna look at are anybody who calls in that says, well, you know, I didn't get a ballot for this last election. We can track that. You didn't get a ballot because you should have voted at Lowell School. And that's okay. We've updated you. You didn't get a ballot and it's because you should have voted at Lowell School. Or Bradley, you were registered at 2310 Craftsman. Is that the right address? Yep. Had to change your mailing address? Nope. That's the people we want to find.
So another data point, on all those provisional ballot forms they have to fill out, there's a box for I didn't receive one. Isn't there not? So can we get that data of the
Yep.
people that filled out provisionals? I mean, they went this
One-
extra step because they had to go vote at the poll.
1,235. However, that is, I did not receive my ballot, I spoiled my ballot, or I need to vote at the polling place provisionally because I don't have access to my ballot.
So we don't have one that's just, I never got one.
Because we would have to ask the state to make that be a specific area, it's statewide uniform. And so we'd have to ask the state to make that a new area to track.
All of the provisionals say.
So it's absentee, I didn't get, I did receive, I destroyed or spoiled, or I need to receive an alternate, and that is that 1,200. But that's not necessarily everybody who just didn't get it. I mean, I'm not at the polls, anecdotally, I hear, I thought that was the fair. Or I thought I could come here and vote, and
They're
then,
just asking about, these are all the apps, these were provisionals.
yep, those are
Or absentee, these
for
were,
absentee.
these weren't people that voted late, registered, you know.
No, those are just provisionals due to absentee ballot, but it's such a large group that it's not just.
So that's not included in the 62. Also, it would. Right.
Yeah, so those would be, they did vote and they voted provisionally, so they're not linked into that
Yeah.
group. Yeah, it's interesting because this group here are the ones who showed up at the polls and voted because they didn't get it. And so when you think about that level of engagement, that's pretty high. That's gonna be I should be absentee, it's important to vote, and I went in and I voted provisionally because I didn't get it. Where the lower level of engagement is I didn't get it and I came here and got it fixed before the election day.
Do you know, normally when you send out those postcards, how many percentage wise do people clean up and how many of them you end up sending the second one to?
On the NVRA post?
Yeah.
Yes, I can pull that data for you. Yeah, we try one. I was loving it because also for the undeliverable post, they get to reply back or if it comes back as undeliverable. So our data point, as we go through this, the number of people who say, well, I never received it, very specifically, this is going to be calls that are responding to NVRA because they never received this ballot. So that wouldn't be the people who went in and voted. That wouldn't be the people who came here and fixed it. That's going to be the people who didn't fix it, who got this and we updated them. And they'd have to contact us to collect that. The next point that we're going to pull is, 3 of them. It's going to be that we're going to compare the address that we resend to the address we have on file. And then the third one you wanted to look at was, I was like, yes, I have this data, and I need to get it written down fast enough. The NVRA, and the responses for NVRA. Yeah, I love it. We've been tracking that for years and years, and now the Secretary of State is tracking that for us, so I can get you everything up till this year. Which is great, and now they're tracking it, and I don't want to pass it up, I just wanted to let you guys know that I'm not going to be able to pull it for 2025, so, yeah. Okay, that's really good, and I think that digs more into this discussion and helps us see it and helps us get to some of these points. I was really struggling when I pulled up the number of provisional ballots because I saw exactly, I knew where you were shooting. I wanted to include that number and it just doesn't align exactly. Like, that's not undeliverable necessarily. Those are people who showed up at the poll and voted provisionally because they had an absentee. They also could have come here and voted provisionally because they had an absentee. Quite a bit in here. Now, that's an EA update. It's been like an hour and a half, 2 hours. Is everybody still alive online?
They're all muted.
Hang in there.
Yep, we're still here.
Good, great.
Yeah.
So we've got a little bit to cover and I'm going to pass it back over here. But one of the big things I was thinking of is this all applies so well towards potential future new business or future things to grow on. EAC's goal is to do research to increase turnout. I want to tag a little bit back towards an idea that I wanted to kick out as my last little bump is something that we could work on that I think could be useful here and across the state would be helping get information about these elections, municipal and special district, what these groups do, and what does it mean to run as a school board trustee? What does it mean to run as a water or sewer board trustee? If this was something that the EAC was interested in, we could help connect you with some of these groups and we could record some quick videos to help put that together. I would ideally look at just special districts. I want to take school districts one step out of our group and reach out to potentially the Office of Public Instruction. Special districts don't feel very political to me at all. School boards can feel a little more political. City council is very political. And I want to step us a step out of that and reach out to the local government committees out of Bozeman about the ones that you guys all did the trainings through about municipal elections. I want to reach out to the OPI about school elections so that we can say, I don't want this to be necessarily a school board or the mayor. If you have beliefs for or against the mayor, that could jade you on watching this whole video. Dan Clark isn't going to jade anybody unless you've watched the local government training about 40 times. But that's sort of my idea and something I wanted to put out as just a recommendation to you guys. And now I can shut up and let you do the rest of the business. Passing it back to you, Kathy. Sorry.
We'll move on to new business, which is EAC appointments. Yeah.
So this is still really late to do this, the close of the meeting, but we wanted to welcome all the new members to the EAC. So, yeah, Jack Rink, who isn't here with us today, advanced from an alternate member to regular member. And then, Adrian here is our new student representative of the University of Montana. And David is our new third alternate. And then online we have John Newman as our first alternate. So very belated in this meeting, but wanted to welcome you all to the EAC. And the packets that I handed you, we just included a copy of the bylaws for the EAC, so you can read that and kind of have a broader understanding of purpose and kind of the history of the creation of the EAC. So John, those bylaws were emailed right before the meeting today. So, and then we also included the roster for everyone today, so everyone has contact info if you want to reach out to one another. Yeah. That's all I have, Kathy.
Okay. Are there any comments from the committee?
It's been made already.
Hearing none. The next meeting will be April 8th. Mark your calendars.
I did want to add to that too. That will be the election of officers at that meeting. So the standard terms start in February 1st, and so we get it in April, and it feels like, yeah, it's once a year, and it's usually that April meeting. We didn't have it in January last year, so it didn't feel.
And for those who are in your room or new may not know, Nathan just joined us in person. He's been online, but he's our deputy administrator.
I thought I'd pop in real quick and just see who all was in the room, since there's been a little turnover since the last time I was involved with the EAC. Nice to see everyone.
I'll move to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you and welcome and good to see you all. See you in a few months.
Thank you all. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, folks. Take care. Bye,
Bye.
everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.